Johnny Carson had one rule: stay in control. Tim Conway broke it every single time. Not with screaming, not with chaos, just a quiet smirk, a deadpan stare, and a joke so perfectly timed that Carson forgot he was on live television.
Let me tell you why Tim Conway's funny, man. He thinks funny. He does funny things.
6 kids, a stolen car, a tie stuck in a bathroom fan. Conway turned nothing into everything. And the audience? They lost it every time. But here's what nobody talks about: the moments between the jokes, the silences, the pauses that made Carson sweat on national TV. Those pauses were the real punchline. Stay with us, because what Tim Conway did next, nobody saw coming. The night Carson lost control. By the time Tim Conway walked onto The Tonight Show in the late 1970s, Johnny Carson had already been hosting for over 15 years. He had interviewed presidents, rock legends, and Hollywood royalty. So the couch beside his desk was his territory, and every guest who sat on it knew it. Nervous guests over-prepared. Confident guests still adjusted their posture the moment the curtain opened. The desk, the chair, the band, the lights, all of it belonged to Carson, and the unspoken rule was simple: you come into his house. You play by his rules. Conway sat down, looked around the studio like a man seeing it for the first time, and said with complete calm, "I didn't know you did this."
No, we have asked you before.
Well, I didn't know you did this.
Carson blinked. The audience laughed. But Carson's laugh had something behind it, a flicker of genuine confusion. Because Conway did not look like he was joking. He looked like a man who had just discovered his old friend had been running a national television program without ever mentioning it. No smirk, no raised eyebrow. Just honest, mild surprise. Sees the kind a person has when they learn something new about someone they thought they knew well. That was the trap, and Carson walked right into it. Conway and Carson had known each other for years. Same industry, same circles, same dinner parties. Conway used that real history as the foundation of the bit, playing it as though The Tonight Show was some private side hobby Johnny had simply never brought up in conversation.
Well, that's true. Now, we've known each other, 4 or 5 years, and you have never said what you do, so I just figured.
The friendship gave the joke a layer of truth that pure fiction could not have produced. When Conway acted genuinely puzzled by the existence of a show Carson had hosted for 15 years, there was something recognizable in it. The specific absurdity of knowing someone well and still missing something enormous about their life. "Whenever I came over the house," he explained, settling deeper into the couch with the ease of a man arriving at a reasonable conclusion, "you just wanted people in the business coming over, eating, running films. So I just trailed off." Nodded, satisfied with his own logic. Carson stared at him. "This is what I do for a living." Conway glanced at the band, the lights, the packed studio audience. "Got a band and everything. It's really good." The studio fell apart. What made this hit so hard was not the words, it was the commitment underneath them. Conway never smiled at his own joke, never shifted in his seat to signal awareness, never gave the audience the nod that says, "I know what I'm doing." He held the character of an innocent, mildly curious man all the way through, and that consistency made Carson's growing confusion funnier with every passing second. The longer it held, the more the audience leaned in because they could see the gap between what Conway was pretending not to know and what the entire room knew, and that gap kept widening. Carson was one of the sharpest interviewers in television history.
This morning we continue our exclusive interview with Johnny Carson, the king of late-night television. A king whose reign of 21 years this Monday makes him the most familiar face on the tube.
He had a move for every situation: a redirect, a callback, a pivot. Guests who tried to go off script were gently steered back. Guests who got too big were quietly leveled. Carson always found the angle. Conway left him with none. Every time Carson tried to pull the conversation back to solid ground, Conway would say something so politely off track that the ground disappeared again. Not through aggression, not through cleverness, but through the quiet persistence of someone who genuinely did not notice anything unusual was happening. And that is the part that separates this from ordinary comedy. And Conway was not attacking Carson. He was not competing with him. He was simply being a man who had somehow missed an obvious thing, and he played that innocence so completely.
I just figured, and I never asked you, so I figured whenever I came over the house, you just wanted people in the business coming over there eating and running films.
And for so long that Carson had no defense against it. You cannot argue with someone who is not arguing. You cannot outmaneuver someone who does not know there is a game being played. The car that nobody came back. With the story of Tim Conway's stolen car is one of the most perfectly constructed bits in Tonight Show history, and the reason it works so well is that Conway never once treats it like a bit. He had been invited to a real Hollywood event, an anniversary party for Steve Lawrence and Eddie Gourmet, two of the biggest names in American entertainment at the time. Steve Lawrence had charted hit records through the 1960s. Eddie Gourmet had won a Grammy. Their anniversary party was not a casual gathering. It was the kind of event where the guest list read like a Hollywood directory. Photographers waited outside, and everything ran on the smooth, invisible machinery of serious money. Valets in matching red jackets managed a steady line of expensive cars pulling up to the entrance. It was, in every visible way, a professional operation. Conway pulled up. A man in a red jacket approached, asked for the keys. Conway handed them over without hesitation because that is exactly what you do when a man in a red jacket approaches your car outside a party with valet service. That is the entire logic of valet parking. A person in a uniform asks for your car, and you give it to them, and later they bring it back. Then Conway asked one follow-up question. "Do I need a ticket?" The man thought about it. "No, I don't think so." That was the last Conway saw of him, or the car.
I said, "Do I need a ticket?" And he said, "No, I don't think so." And that's the last I saw of him or my car.
Now, here is where most people would make their first mistake. Most people, telling this story, would lean into the outrage, the indignation of being robbed at a fancy party in front of 100 witnesses, the embarrassment of having to explain to the host why you need a ride home, the sheer audacity of someone stealing a car in a red jacket at a Steve Lawrence anniversary celebration. These are all real, relatable, funny angles, and Conway ignored every single one of them. He told this on the Tonight Show couch, with zero drama. No frustration in his voice, no exaggerated disbelief, no comedic outrage. Just the facts, laid out in the tone of a man recounting a mildly unusual errand. The car was gone. A man had taken it. Conway had permitted him. And these things happen. Carson leaned forward with the expression of a man who could not quite believe what he was hearing. "You gave your car to some guy in a red jacket?" Conway considered the question with genuine seriousness, the way a person considers a question they find slightly puzzling because the answer seems obvious. "Well, if a guy comes up at a party, they have valet, a guy in a red coat says, 'Can I have your car?' Wouldn't you give it to him?"
They have valet and everything. A guy comes up in a red coat and says, "Can I have your car?" Wouldn't you give it to him?
I guess so.
I did.
Carson sat with that for a moment. The audience sat with it too. And then Carson said, quietly and honestly, "I guess so. I did," said Conway. That two-line exchange is the whole joke. Carson's reluctant, "I guess so," lands harder than any scripted punchline could because it is not scripted. Carson actually thought about it, and the honest answer was yes. In that exact situation, And with that exact setup, most people hand over their keys without a second thought. The theft only registers as a theft in retrospect, once you realize the jacket was decorative rather than professional. Conway had not been foolish. He had been normal. The situation was the problem, not the man. What Conway understood, and what made this bit sharper than it appeared, was that the funniest angle was never the loss. It was the logic. He never played victim. He never expressed regret or embarrassment. He defended his decision with the steady calm of a man whose reasoning was, from where he stood, completely sound. And by refusing to see himself as wronged, he created a gap between what the audience understood and what Conway appeared to understand, and that gap, held open and never acknowledged, was exactly where the laughter lived. Silence is funnier than words. Carson once introduced a segment by announcing that he and Conway would simply have a conversation. Two professionals. No prep needed. Just talk. Conway agreed, settled into the couch, looked at Carson, then did absolutely nothing. Not the nothing of someone who has gone blank or lost their nerve. The deliberate, unhurried nothing of a man who has decided this is exactly the right move and is executing it with full confidence. The studio went quiet. A few seconds passed, which on live television feel much longer than they do anywhere else. Someone in the audience coughed. Then someone laughed, softly, not at a joke.
Yeah, the reviewers were kind of confused because the audience was laughing and they couldn't hear the line, so they kind of panned it and went out of Broadway, and it's a real funny play.
But at the sheer discomfort of waiting. Conway did not move. He was not nervous. He was not stalling. He was simply present, as calm as a man waiting for a bus that he knows is coming. Carson tried to redirect. Conway acknowledged him with the minimum possible response and returned to stillness. The audience laughed harder. Not because something funny had happened, nothing had happened, but because the situation had developed its own logic, and that logic was becoming funnier by the second. This is the hardest thing a comedian can do on live television. The entire infrastructure of a talk show, the producers, the prep, the pre-interviews exists to prevent dead air. Conway walked through all of it and turned the dead air into the material. What he understood at a deep level is that laughter is not a response to jokes. It is a response to tension. A well-timed joke builds tension and releases it. Conway knew this. He also knew that the moment he smiled or shifted or signaled awareness, the spell would break. So he held it. Carson, to his enormous credit, held with him. He did not laugh it off or call for a break. He stayed in it, which made Conway's stillness funnier because now there were two people sitting in deliberate silence on national television, and neither of them was going to blink first. The preacher who loved his subject. Raleigh D. Tucker did not walk onto the Tonight Show stage he arrived.
My first guest tonight was not announced. He's a fascinating preacher, and this is his first appearance with us, and I'm sure he has some special thoughts to share. Would you welcome the Reverend Raleigh D. Tucker?
There is a difference. He carried himself with the settled authority of a man who has given the same speech in 100 rooms and has never once doubted the importance of what he had to say. He stepped to the microphone, adjusted himself, looked out at the studio audience with patient certainty, and spoke in the measured cadence of the American Southern pulpit. I would like to talk to you tonight about drinking. The audience laughed at the setup. A preacher, a sermon, a moral warning they had seen this shape before. They knew where it was going. They did not know where it was going. Raleigh D. Tucker was, it emerged, entirely in favor of drinking. When it comes to liquor, as for me, I love it.
When it comes to liquor, as for me, I love it. If you haven't tried it, I advise you to stop at your local tavern and pick yourself up a jug.
He delivered this with the same gravity he had used to to announce his topic. Same eye contact, same unhurried pace, same complete conviction. And then, in the full voice of pastoral authority, he advised the congregation to stop by their local tavern and pick up a jug. The laughter was not polite. It was the harder, more surprised kind, the laughter of an audience that had leaned one direction and been pushed the other. The comedy here is entirely structural. Conway took a form the revival sermon and reversed its content while keeping its delivery intact. The gap between what the form normally contains and what Conway put inside it was the joke. And that gap only works if the delivery never wavers. The moment the preacher winks, the illusion collapses. Conway never winked. Raleigh D. Tucker believed everything he said. He was not performing for the audience. He was not aware of being funny. He was a man of genuine conviction who happened to hold unusual positions. And he expressed those positions with the full rhetorical toolkit of someone trained to move rooms. The pauses, the emphasis, the rising cadence before a key line. All of it belonged to a real person, not a sketch character, not a costume, but a fully formed human being who had walked in off the street. So that completeness is the difference between a good character bit and a great one. Good character work gives you the costume and the voice. Great character work gives you the person, their certainty, their logic, their relationship with the world. Conway gave you the person. And because the person was real, the absurdity landed with real weight. Committing to the bit is something every comedian talks about. Raleigh D. Tucker is what it actually looks like. The man who showed up with everything. Most people know one version of Tim Conway, the quiet, deadpan figure who turns awkward silences into comedy and makes doing nothing look like an art form. That version is real. But his 1987 Tonight Show appearance showed something different. A man who had come with a full set of prepared material and was ready to deliver it cleanly. He opened with an airline story. His wife had found a deal on a carrier called Kono Airlines.
Yeah, we did a commercial in New York, so we went in together, and that was a time that the airfare were at war and everything. So he said, I think we should take, get on a cheaper flight.
A round trip to Miami for $4. Conway boarded with reasonable suspicion and was rewarded for it almost immediately. The standby situation, he explained, was unusual. 37 seats, 1,100 people waiting. He described the arithmetic gap without alarm, the way a person describes weather notable but not worth getting worked up about. Then he mentioned that the wait had been long enough for couples in the standby line to meet, fall in love, get married, and have children all before the flight was called. The audience laughed hard, not just at the image, but at the delivery. As Conway presented this timeline as mildly interesting rather than impossible, the same flat, conversational tone that described the $4 ticket described the children born in the queue. And that consistency of register is what made the escalation land. There was no visible seam between the real and the absurd. This is tight stand-up construction, a real situation the audience recognizes, escalated past the point of logic, delivered as though the logic is still intact. Conway did it without a single pause for the laugh, without a single glance at the camera. He just kept talking, and the audience kept collapsing. That 1987 appearance reportedly drew some of the highest Tonight Show ratings in years during this segment. And the production team later described the audience response as among the strongest they had recorded for a solo guest in that era. Conway had walked in with a set, delivered it inside an interview format, and made it feel spontaneous the whole way through. Later the same night, he introduced the Dorf character by that point already, a franchise that had expanded from golfer to weightlifter to jockey to elf. On this visit, Dorf was attempting basketball. Conway walked Carson through the character's origin story with the same casual energy, mentioning at one point that the golf bit had required him to be buried in an actual golf course while tractors drove over him. The golf course did not know that, he said. No particular emphasis, just information. What the 1987 appearance made clear was the full width of what Conway could do. See, in one evening, tight stand-up, long-form character work, physical comedy, and conversational deadpan. He moved between all of them without visible effort, as though they were not different skills, but simply different ways of having the same conversation. Most performers master one mode. Conway mastered all of them, and then learned to use them in the same hour. Most people remember Tim Conway as the guy who made Carol Burnett laugh until she cried. But what happened on Johnny Carson's couch was something different. There was no script for those moments, no safety net, just a quiet man who understood that the funniest thing in any room is the thing nobody planned for. He stole the show by never seeming to want it. He got the biggest laughs by saying the least. He made Carson, the sharpest interviewer in television history, look like a man who had never done this before. That is a level of skill most performers spend an entire career chasing. Tim Conway found it by accident. Or at least, that's what he wanted you to think. Which joke hit you the hardest? Tell us in the comments below.